Let us see about the radial type of the vascular bundle. So in this, the xylem and the phloem. So we are talking based upon the arrangement of xylem and phloem. എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഒരു പാർട്ടിൽ, ഒരു പ്ലാന്റിന്റെ പാർട്ടിൽ എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഈ ഫ്ലോയമും സൈലമും പ്ലേസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ളത്? How are they arranged? Based on that we are speaking here, right? So the first one is the radial type. Here the xylem and the phloem are arranged in an alternate manner on different radii. You can see it here in this diagram. This is the radial type of vascular bundle. Here you can see the xylem in one radius and the phloem in the different radius, right? So when the xylem and phloem are arranged in an alternate manner means, so this one is xylem and the other comes the phloem, again xylem, phloem, like that, right? So alternate manner, when xylem and phloem are arranged in an alternate manner on different radii, and they are not present in the same radius, they are present in two different radius, right? So such a type of vascular bundle arrangement is called as the radial type. And in which part do we see this? We see this in the root portion of the plants. And comes the next one, which is called as the conjoint type. So this conjoint type, the xylem and phloem are jointly situated. You can see it here. This is conjoint type of vascular bundle. So if you see it, it has a open type vascular bundle and closed type vascular bundle. So cambium is present in open type and cambium is absent in the closed type, right? So in this, what happens, xylem and phloem are jointly situated at the same radius. So they are present at the same radius of the vascular bundle. Usually the phloem is located on the outer side of the xylem. Okay, usually xylem will be seen towards the inner portion and the phloem will be seen in the outer side. So here we saw that they are present in two different radii, right? And in this conjoint type, they are present on the, or they are jointly situated at the same radius. Okay, and usually which vascular bundle is seen outside? It is the phloem. Okay, so phloem is located on outside of the xylem. Okay, and where do we see this type of arrangement? We see this in stems and leaves, right? So in roots we see the radial type, and in stem and leaves we see the conjoint type. Clear with open type, closed type, radial type and conjoint type, children? Now let us move on to the anatomy of the monocotyledonous and dicotyledonous plants, right? So we are going to start with anatomy of dicot and monocot plants. So for better understanding of the tissue organization of different parts of the plants like root, stem and leaf, we are going to study the transverse section of the mature zones of these organs. അപ്പോൾ അത് ഒരു പ്ലാന്റ് മെച്ചോർ ആയ ശേഷം, കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ഗ്രോത്ത് കഴിഞ്ഞ ശേഷം എങ്ങനെയായിരിക്കും ഉണ്ടാവും, based on that only we are going to learn about the different parts of the plant and how is their tissue organization. Okay, so for better understanding of tissue organization of root, stem and leaf, it is convenient to study the transverse section of the mature zone of these organ, right? So what is this transverse section, children? If you take a stem portion of a plant, think that this is a stem portion of a plant. If we cut here and if you take a part to study, so it is called as the transverse section, right? So if you view this transverse section under the microscope, we will be able to find the mature zones of these different organs of the plant. Okay, so let us learn about each of these organs in detail, and we will learn what type of tissues are seen there and how it is arranged, right? So now let us move on to the topic. So if you take the case of the dicotyledonous root, so we'll be first learning about the root portion. We will see what are different types of tissues which is seen in the root portion, and first we will be learning about dicot root, and then we will learn about the monocot root. So you can see the TS, that is the transverse section of the dicot root or the primary root. Okay, so if you take the transverse section of any plant, this is the example of the sunflower root portion. Okay, so the transverse section of the dicot root which you see here is the sunflowers, right? And this shows the following tissue organization. We will see what are the different types of tissue organization which we see here, right? So the outermost part of the root is the epidermis. We know that throughout the plant's body, the epidermis is the outermost region, right? And it is also called as epiblemma, right? So epidermis is also called as epiblemma. The outermost portion is the epidermis. And then we will be learning about the next tissue organization, which is the cortex, right? So what does this cortex include? It includes the parenchyma cells and the endodermis layer. We will be learning what is endodermis. So this cortex, it includes the parenchyma cells, the endodermis, right? And if you take the case of this endodermis, it is a layer which has different parts in it. So after cortex, we will be seeing the endodermis layer, and then comes the last part, which is the stele, right? So these are the 4 different tissue organization which we see in the root portion of a dicot plant. The stele includes the pericycle, vascular bundle, and the pith, right? So we'll be learning about epidermis, cortex, endodermis, and stele, right? So let us learn about each of these parts in detail, and then we'll move on to the monocot root. Okay, so if you take the case of this different parts of the dicot root, as we told, we'll first learn about the epidermis, right? So let us see the epidermis portion. So what is epidermis? It is the outermost layer of the root. So throughout the plant body, epidermis is the outermost layer, and as we are studying about dicot root here, epidermis here, it means the outermost layer of the root. And we are able to find many cells protruding as unicellular root hairs from the epidermis. So this outermost layer is the epidermis, right? You are able to see this, right? So this layer is the epidermis, and this part is the one which produce many unicellular root hairs from them. Okay, so this is about epidermis. Now coming to the cortex portion, as I told, it includes the parenchyma cells and also the endodermis. So if you take the case of cortex, the first one is, it consists of several layers of thin-walled parenchyma cells with intercellular spaces. So you can see this after the epidermis, you can see a layer which is called as the cortex. So till this is the cortex portion, right? So this cortex portion is made up of several layers of thin-walled parenchyma cells. അപ്പോൾ ഈ ഒരു പിങ്ക് ഡിഫറൻസിയേഷൻ വരെ ഉള്ളത് it is the parenchyma cells, right? So it is a cortex portion, and how was this cortex portion made up of? It is made up of the thin-walled parenchyma cells with intercellular spaces. So between the cells, they will show some space. You can see empty space in between 2 cells of parenchyma, right? So it consists of several layers. So you can see how many layers the cortex includes. So till this portion, till this part, it is the cortex portion. So what is it made up of? It is made up of the parenchyma cells without intracellular spaces. Okay, so now let us move on to the next layer of the cortex, which is the endodermis. What is this endodermis? It is the innermost single layer of the cortex. What is it? It is the innermost single layer of the cortex. You can see the endodermis here. After the parenchyma cell, it has the endodermis. You can see it here, right? So this single layer of the cortex is called as the endodermis, right? You're able to see this, right? Okay, and how are these endodermis made up of? They are made up of barrel-shaped cells without intercellular spaces. You can see it here. It is a barrel-shaped. You can see the shape of the cell. So this is one endodermis cell, right? So you can see the shape. It is barrel in shape, and it has no space between each cell. You can see the 2 cells. It is very nearer to each other. So these endodermis, they do not have the intercellular spaces. And the tangential and radial walls. What is this tangential? So this wall, the center portion of the endodermis, and the radial wall. So radial wall is this part, right? So of endodermal cells have a deposition of suberin, which is a water impermeable waxy material. Okay, and we call this as Casparian stripes, right? So tangentially and radially they have deposition of a substance which is called as suberin, and these substances are water impermeable. It means that they will not allow the water to enter into the endodermis. Okay, so these are water impermeable waxy material in the form of Casparian stripes. So we are calling these stripes as Casparian stripes. You can see in this diagram now, children. So you can see they have marked the Casparian stripes. So this one, the tangential wall, it forms the deposition. It has a deposition of suberin, and the radial wall also you can see they will have the deposition of suberin. Right, and what is the use of the suberin? It will not allow the water to enter into the parts of the that is endodermis, right? And we are calling these forms as Casparian stripes. So throughout the layer they have this, right? That on the middle portion of this endodermis you can see the Casparian stripes. So throughout the layer they have this, and we are calling this waxy material which is called as the Casparian stripes. The waxy material is made up of suberin and it will form a Casparian stripe. So, ഒരു വര കൊടുത്ത പോലെ endodermisന്റെ മേല you can find this Casparian stripes. Right? Clear with that? Okay. Now let us move on to the next part. So, we have finished with the cortex, that is cortex, epidermis and endodermis. Now let us move on to the next part, which is the stele. Okay, so the stele, as I said, it includes the pericycle, pith and the vascular bundles. Okay, so we will learn about each of them in detail. So tissues on the inner side of endodermis, right? So these are the tissues on inner side of endodermis, and what do they include? They include pericycle, pith and the vascular bundles. We will be learning what is conjunctive tissue. Okay, so first let us see about the pericycle. So after the endodermis, we find few layers of thick-walled parenchymatous cell. So here in the cortex, it was thin-walled parenchymatous cell, and inside the endodermis, it has the thick-walled parenchymatic cell. Right, so you can see here cells which are very nearer to each other. So this few layers of thick that is thick-walled parenchymatous cell will be seen next to the endodermis. And it is from this part there is initiation of lateral roots and vascular cambium during secondary growth taking place in the cell. So cambium the production, the secondary growth or the vascular cambium formation, and the lateral roots will arise from the layer which is called as the pericycle. So initiation of this happens. Starting point is this pericycle layer. And what is this pericycle made up of? It is made up of few layers of thick-walled parenchymatous cell. Now move on to the next part, children, which is the pith. Right? So what is this pith? It is the innermost region of the root. Right? Not root, it is the innermost portion which we see in any organ of the plant. It can be in the root, stem, leaf, everywhere, right? So this is the pith. The center portion is the pith, and this pith is small or inconspicuous. It means that it is either very small or else it won't be properly visible. Okay, so it is called as the pith. Now coming to the next tissue, which is called as conjunctive tissue. So these tissues are the one which are found in between xylem and the phloem. So you can see this is the phloem cells which you see here, and this is the xylem. You can see the brownish colored structure, right? So that is the xylem, and nearby it is the phloem, right? So the parenchymatous cell which lies between the xylem and phloem is called as the conjunctive tissue. right? So we see the parenchymatous cell surrounding the xylem and the phloem. It is called as the conjunctive tissue, right? Now let us learn about the vascular bundle. Let us see how the vascular bundles are present. So here we are talking about the xylem and phloem. So in vascular bundle, 2 to 4 xylem and phloem patches are seen. So how is the xylem and phloem? We will be seeing 2 to 4 xylem and phloem. You can see the 4 numbers in the xylem, or it can be either 2 or 4 xylem and phloem patches. And later a cambium ring will develop between xylem and phloem. Okay, so after sometimes later, what will happen? There will be a formation of the cambium ring between the xylem and phloem. Okay, I hope you remember about the open type, right? So when it is open type, it shows the cambium formation, which will give rise to secondary xylem and phloem. Clear? So this is about the vascular bundle. Clear, children? So these are the different parts of the dicotyledonous root.